Chris Schmidt, Mark Radak, Elijah Herbal. So what I just did is the equivalent to trying to call the perfect play clock's winding down, and people are screaming at the quarterback for getting a 5-yard penalty. I say, Elijah Herbal, let's stream this bad boy with about 90 seconds left before we come back from Sports Center. So we're efforting here on Facebook at ESPN Lincoln, and bang, he's on the spot. Brandon L. Vogel in his football office. Kranak, are you pretty enough for camera this morning?
Yeah, well, that's debatable, but I'm going to join anyways.
Okay. And we're going to say hi to Brandon Vogel if he's flexing the old Hulk Hogan pythons right there. Vogues, good morning. How are we?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good. Is that tea or just diesel coffee this morning?
Oh, just black coffee always.
Okay.
Maybe in Ireland I'll have some tea.
Okay. There's Mark Kranak. We invite you to check out ESPN Lincoln's Twitter handle at ESPN Lincoln or Facebook Live on ESPN Lincoln.
Does Mark have audio is the question.
Kranak, are you on mute?
I got you. I got Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah. And Vogue's shaking his head, so we're good.
So if I go like this, does that change something?
Yes, it does. You are echoing horribly.
Okay, so now I'm going to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I couldn't hear Brandon, and I'm not sure I can today either. But
hi, Mark.
No, can't hear Brandon.
Yeah. I'm going to effort this.
Yeah.
So what?
You do that?
So we have gone from a 5-yard penalty, timeout. We get out of the timeout, and we still don't know what the hell play we're going to run.
Fans got heads and hands,
and it's my fault. We'll dive in. Kranak will get you fixed. But Vogue's pretty eventful week with Nebraska as they are going to shift next week after Sunday's scrimmage into prep mode for Northwestern. It's all prep, but I want to start off with Whipple and some of his discussion points on the offense and the quarterback room and the juice part of things. Do you get the feeling that the offense is coming along at a decent clip despite a bump in the road here or there? You can have a bad day, but it doesn't sound like they've had a bad camp.
Yeah, I think that's my impression too, and a good way to put that. I think the first Mark Whipple availability of fall camp, he kind of praised how far they'd come, even just since the end of spring football. Casey Thompson, in that same day that Whipple spoke, the bad day for the offense, noted that he's seen growth from the offense to this point, and it was kind of held against him out of context, I think, in some cases. But overall, it's going to be a work in progress, I think, a little bit. So you got to look back at kind of the consistency of the message throughout this whole time. Also, you get into week 3 of fall camp, and I think that tends to be the hey, let's knock a group back or two just if we need to kind of keep the horses pulling and keep everybody motivated. That always seems to happen right around this time. You got through the first couple of weeks. It's like, hey, we're out here praising everybody. Everything's going great. Now we're going to say that could have been better.
You always have to correct a little bit, and it can't always be sunshine and roses. You got to have some reality mixed in, and I think Whipple's really good at the reality part, and I'm sure he is eloquent when he gets very real. Same with Mickey Joseph. We touched on that to start off the show with some of his comments and public airing. A little Festivus going on, Vogues.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you could put Bill Bush in that group too, who and that's the advantage, I think. And when you look at the changes Nebraska made, which we've all done for 8 months now, there may not be a whole lot more there to digest, but you get some of these coaches. I mean, Whipple's been in the game for 40 years. Joseph and Bush, not quite that long, but pretty long tenures. They've been doing this for a while. you kind of get the I ain't got time for this crap sentiment a little bit, because they've been around, they've seen everything. And it's not that a young coach can't come in and be that way from the start. I think it's just something that's earned a little bit through experience, and having the respect to maintain that point of view certainly has helped if you have as much experience in the game as those three in particular do.
Brandon Vogel joining us, Hail Varsity Weekend at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter, managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine, and his book with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. So we're making our way through camp, and we need to spend some time on the offensive line. Bogues, are you beer half full? Hey, it sounds like Ben Hart's doing better. Or beer half gone. All right, Corcoran's been watching, and Teddy's still trying to get back to 100%, or at least knock that rust off.
I'd purchased just half a beer, and I haven't taken a drink yet, so I need to see a little more before I can determine if it's half full or half empty. It might depend on how much I like to do. No, I mean, really, that's kind of it, because we haven't had the opportunity to hear from Raiola yet. We're supposed to this past week, and we will, I think, next week, and that'll be good, but until you see it, and there was such a, I think, burden of proof on that group coming into this year based on how last year went, and you've got some returning players, which is good. It should help, but that one in particular, offensive line is really, really detailed work. It's kind of, I think, hard to assess. I certainly feel that way, and I watch a ton of football. So it becomes a little bit binary. Like, are you giving up sacks? Oh, you are? That's bad. Can you run the ball? You can't? That's bad. So that's kind of where we last left Nebraska. So the things we're hearing through fall camp, all fine and good, and I think there's reason there for optimism that just a change in leadership can help. But it's the sort of thing, maybe more than any other group on the entire team, offense or defense, I think you got to see it on the field, and we're still a couple weeks away from that.
See, I'm going to jump in here quick ahead of you, Mark, just because I liked that beer half full analogy. It's almost like the way I see the offensive line is, yeah, beer half full, but it kind of looks and smells like Natty Light. That's what I'm feeling.
Some people like that.
It's true. No, I think that's accurate. That's always been the question with the optimism, pessimism, glass analogy. What's in the glass? That makes a difference.
If it's a natter day, who knows, right? Like that might translate well to Saturday. Brandon, from what you've seen with Northwestern, we've been pretty narrowly focused on Nebraska, and I've talked about every position group. When you dove into Northwestern coming into this year, high level, what I'm seeing is they get a good back that's coming back. Quarterback is a question. Defense, one of their worst years in Pat Fitzgerald's history there, probably stands to get better. Anything I'm missing? Do you think that about wraps it up?
No, I think that's kind of the general, one sheeter on Northwestern.
Yeah.
Defensively, kind of a drop was coming for Northwestern last year, not just with the experience that team lost, but they also lost a longtime defensive coordinator. So it was reasonable to expect them to take a step back. That said, the step back they took was larger than I expected. Yeah. Losing Brandon Joseph, who's probably one of the best safeties in the country, transferred to Notre Dame in the offseason, doesn't help with that. But I would still expect Northwestern's defense to bounce back pretty solidly. They've got an elite player on the defensive line. They're going to be good at linebacker. So defensively, I think this should look a little more vintage Pat Fitzgerald Northwestern-y, for lack of a better term. Offensively, you mentioned they have a pretty good back, rush for over 1,000 yards, which is not a common occurrence at Northwestern. That said, they're going to go through another change of quarterback. This has been one of the worst passing offenses in the country, maybe the worst Power 5 passing offense in the country the past 2 seasons. That said, they still made it to the Big Ten title game in 2020 with that being the case. So they don't need a ton there. But I think offensively, that's the big question mark. also have an elite player on the offensive line. So you've got two stars, I think, two guys who will be NFL draft picks on the line. That's a pretty good starting point when you're talking about a Northwestern and some of the challenges they have recruiting wise.
And Brandon, I feel like we've mentioned it a couple times on this show where it's, well, if Nebraska loses to Northwestern, it's because Northwestern plays cleaner football than Nebraska. They muck up the game. It's classic Big Ten football. But can we dive a little further into that just for a second? If Northwestern does, in fact, win this football game, how do you think they do it? Is it on the back of that running game? Is it Helinski coming out at quarterback and playing better than we expect? Is it the defense? How do you think Northwestern actually gets it done if they are to beat Nebraska?
Yeah, good question. I think defensively, it starts with if they're able to keep the big plays down, which is key to any football game. But Northwestern has a history of doing that. And when we last left Nebraska a season ago, a different offense ago, it was one of the most explosive passing offenses in the country. Run game wasn't that. So if you can limit the big plays in the passing game, if you're Northwestern, it puts the onus on a running game that, to go back to the offensive line, not to mention running back, is a bit more of a mystery for Nebraska. Like if I were Northwestern going into this game, not knowing much about what this new Nebraska looks like, which is the case actually, I would say let's keep the passing game in front of us. It's going to look different. They're going to do some different things. They'll hit us occasionally, but let's keep that in front and make them beat us by running football. Offensively, yeah, they probably need to lean on that run game. Probably need a couple of short fields. So there's your special teams mention of this segment. And if they do that, I think offensively, the book doesn't change much on Northwestern. They're going to need some short fields via turnovers, special teams. They're going to kind of grind it out. And Nebraska was really good at limiting big plays itself last year. I don't know that you worry about that a ton going into this with Northwestern. They just haven't historically been that explosive of an offense.
Northwestern's done well against Nebraska since the two have started dancing. And every time, this isn't a knock on Northwestern, and this isn't an excuse for Nebraska, but more the reality, Vogues. When Northwestern's beat Nebraska, and they've done it in Lincoln, they've done it miraculously the last couple of times in Evanston, they've had help. And that's the big question is you're right on with the run game needs to be a reality for Nebraska this year. There needs to be better pass protection. It's got to be better special teams. But to your point, Elijah, about clean football in game one overseas, it's got to be marketably better for Nebraska super early to escape this thing. And I'm not propping Northwestern up as Bama. I just look at the math and how it's happened. And it's been a lot of help by Nebraska with Northwestern, and they were good enough to capitalize on it over the years.
Yeah, I think back to that 2020 game, which was just, the second game of the season of that shortened season for Nebraska. And we didn't know yet that Northwestern was not just going to win the West, but win the West and then go put a serious scare into Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Nebraska was in a great spot for like 66% of that game. And then you had the 2 second half interceptions. And that's what it is, and that's maybe that's the best way to kind of boil down what we might see in Ireland in a couple of weeks is Northwestern knows it doesn't need to be a risk-taking offense. Nebraska has always kind of towed that line. Like it knows it can gain yards in bunches and it can put up a bunch of points like it did against Northwestern last year when it's really hitting. But that comes with a little bit more risk. I would say Northwestern's kind of base setting is a little bit more risk averse on offense. And then that's where the turnovers piece of it comes in. And that's where the start to the game of it comes in. Last year Nebraska hit for a 70-plus yard pass on its first play. And the game, we didn't know at the time, and I wouldn't have said it at the time, but looking at it now, the game was basically over at that point. You do that against Northwestern to start, you get on the board first, and all of a sudden a offense that wants to be risk averse has to get a little bit more risky. And that's a tough spot for Northwestern to be offensively.
One thing offensively about Scott Frost's offense at Oregon, UCF, and then even Nebraska, effectiveness aside, it's very creative, and you'd probably classify it as somewhat exotic. What about Mark Whipple?
I think they have a chance to be that in this first game, particularly. And I mean, I think so. Whipple's interesting. He comes from he was kind of a no huddle pioneer in the late 80s, 90s, in New Haven, the University of New Haven, at Brown, at places like it was hard to notice. But he had a sterling reputation early in his coaching career for being innovative in that. And he's kind of taken some of those classic West Coast route concepts and molded it to modern day football. I mean, I fully expect Nebraska tempo-wise to be faster this year than they have been in the past. And that's kind of that was one of the big weapons that we associated with Frost through the UCF years. I mean, where he came from, Oregon, obviously lent itself to that. But Whipple was very, very well regarded as a young head coach, to the point where Bill O'Brien was on his staff at Brown. Chip Kelly, who was in New Hampshire at the time, would come down and, just trade ideas like coaches do. So those are kind of the really early roots of it. I don't know if you'll see some of the, dynamic play calls that we associate with Frost from sometimes. I mean, there's some plays that Nebraska has run in the past where you're just like, okay, well, that was fun. That was like a video game play. That might be something I select in NCAA football just to try it out because it looks kind of crazy. I don't know if you'll get that piece of it in a Whipple offense. It'll be a little bit more kind of classically grounded, but they've got all the clubs in the bag, I think, with Whipple calling the plays here.
That's fascinating. And I was watching a YouTube feature on Whipple with his career and his tree and his family, so to speak, in the world of football with the NFL and in college, and his Bruce Arians connections. But it's funny when we think about what's this offense going to look like, going to be, and to your point, I could see Nebraska going vintage Buffalo Bills, no, not K-gun, so to speak, but if they get in rhythm, he loves going 2-minute drill as a normal offense. And that's not the tempo or the hurry up we've thought about, at least I haven't, in college football the last 10 to 15 years because of the Oregon presence, right? It's the original 2-minute drill, I guess. But with Nebraska's wideouts and weapons, and you got the right guy slinging the pill, and protection holds true. I mean, it could be pretty fun this year for Nebraska.
Yeah, and I think the key to really upping that tempo, if they want to use that as a weapon, is being consistent in the pass game. Can you consistently, you've got all these route concepts that work on paper, that the way that they're designed. Do you have the quarterback? Do you have the receivers, the tight ends, to just consistently take 5-6 yards when it's there? Because if you do that, you can go right back to the line and go again, and you can go down the field that way if you can do it consistently. Nebraska over the past 4 seasons, I think, it's wanted to rely on the run game to do that. The passing game, Nebraska got guys open a ton. Minus 2020, it's been a pretty big play passing game, and that's fine and good. I just don't think the thing gumming up the works here was Nebraska was never consistent enough in the run game, particularly the handoff run game, to truly go as fast as I think they were capable of doing. Now, my guess is they'll try to do that through a little bit more of a controlled passing game, a shorter passing game. Doesn't mean they won't take shots, but and if they can do that, then they have the ability to really push the tempo, and then your run game becomes a little bit of your constraint, which could make things easier and make that piece of it look really good.
Well, Brendan, let me just ask you this question. With Nebraska, you mentioned the fact that their passing game has been more of a big play passing game over the past couple of years. And I think part of that is I'm not sure they've had a guy who can consistently get open on those 5-6 yard routes. Austin Allen maybe was that guy last season, but that's not really how they utilized him. Do you see a guy that's a pass catcher in this offense this year that is going to be a consistent, target at that 5 to 6 yard range, a guy who can run clean routes and is a big body. Because I'm not sure I see that guy right now. It feels like there's a lot of big play guys among the pass catchers, but I'm not sure I see a consistent, keep the offense in rhythm type of guy.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't see the individual that I can point to and say, well, that's the guy you're talking about, Elijah. It's going to have to be a little by committee. I think that's the case for the receiver group as a whole. There's players there that I like. I'm particularly high on Garcia Castaneda. I really like guys who have had a good amount of success at, a quote unquote lower level. He was FBS, but New Mexico State. The same reason I was encouraged to hear Omar Brown was getting some time with the ones. The Northern Iowa transfer. Samori Toure was a guy last year who might not be that classic big body type, but in my view, he could do whatever you needed him to do. He would have been a success in this offense. If he was returning, he would be the player I would probably identify as that. So that being the case, that you don't have that one guy, which Whipple sure does love to feed a top line receiver if he has one. You can go back and look at the receiving numbers under him over multiple years and see that as the case. It's going to have to be, that really puts the onus on the quarterback, presumably Casey Thompson, to be like, somebody's going to be open. Like if we run our routes well and we block this well, like somebody's going to come open. Can you consistently find the guy? Are you willing to take those, 5-6 yard passes and just be happy with it? And, we'll see in a couple of weeks.
Hey, quickly on volleyball, Brandon, because they've kicked off practice and they're a couple weeks away from their opening match as well. Couple questions. Outside of Caitlin Horde, who's obviously going to lock down the middle blocker spot, who do you expect to join her there? And then secondly, what do we know about Kennedy Orr, soon to be the starting setter? What do we know about her in the back row? Does Nebraska take a step back there? Is she a liability? Is she competent? How will she do defensively?
Yeah, middle blocker. So Horde is a massive addition, obviously. And then you've got two probably true freshmen competing for that spot. Both, of course, this is Nebraska, among the best middle blockers in the country. I would give a slight lead to Becca Alec at this point. Maybe both her and Mendelson have Team USA experience from this summer at different stages. Alec was able to enroll in January. Talking with Jacob Padilla a little bit, who watched that first Nebraska practice, he said she was kind of with that top group because both Horde and Mendelson, who got here a little later, maybe needed a little bit more individual instruction. So I think she's a little bit ahead on that front. Kennedy Orr, it's everything that we've heard about her so far, and including some from players currently on the team, is that she's as good as advertised. She can do a bit of everything. Kayla Akana is a big departure for Nebraska in terms of serving first, but also that back row defense. I don't know if there's a lot of players in the country who can match that, but I don't expect a huge drop off if Orr is back there and going that route for the Huskers. I think they'll be okay.
Brendan Vogel's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine. The volleyball preview is going to print Monday, Vogues. Let's tell folks a little bit about what they can get when they subscribe, but no doubt it's we talk about the college football Bible being the Hail Varsity football yearbook. You guys crush it, as always, with volleyball just around the corner.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite issues to put out each year. We started doing this a couple years ago as kind of a counterpart to our big football yearbook that comes out in June. August, we do volleyball. So this issue is jam-packed with volleyball. Aaron Sorensen has a great profile of Nicklin Hames, which obviously there's some intrigue around her story. And Jacob, of course, provides as in-depth a breakdown as of Big Ten volleyball as you'll want to see. We got some good stuff that we got while at Big Ten Media Days there. So that issue goes to print on Monday. I'll be working on that as well, our whole team all weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. If you go now to Hail Varsity hailvarsity.com/subscribe, you can actually get a $20 discount on that. You just use the promo code VB22. So VB for volleyball, of course. So if you're interested, you can get in at a discounted price, and that gets you a full year, which will get you all of our coverage through the fall up to next football yearbook in June.
Brandon Vogel. Vogues, appreciate you, bud. Have a good rest of your weekend. Great stuff on volleyball and football as always. Mark Kranak is
look at that lighting Mark's got going.
I'm gonna have to fix the blinds here in a second.
He's in a noir film all of a sudden.
I was gonna say all he needs is a cigarette and like one of those little funny noir hats, you know.
I need to see Rita Hayworth pinned up behind you. I mean, it looks like he's in Dufresne's cell right there.
That's an old Nebraska drummer, cheerleader person.
What? Oh, behind you?
Yeah.
Where's the Wonder Mons pick?
I don't have that one. I got one of a game in Kansas where there's the defensive coordinator for Devaney an assistant coach on one knee puffing a heater, as Elijah just alluded to.
That was help me out, Vogues, the linebacker coach.
I can't remember either, but I know the photo Mark's talking about.
Yeah.
He had some goofy looking hat.
Yeah. And then Memorial Stadium being created right there. Not bad.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. A lot of history. Well
done. The radio room, the football office, and me and Elijah here at the friendly confines. Vogues, have a good weekend, bud. Thank you.
You too, guys. Thanks.
Right,
thanks, Braden.
You guys want to keep this live stream rocking for Gary?
I think so.
Let's do it.
All right. Quick time out. We'll get to the Iron Horse next. Gary Sharp will be with us on Hail Varsity Weekend, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
How do you remember things? Post-it note, string around your finger, smartphone reminder? Whatever you do, remember Nebraska Pick 3 2x2 and My Day. 3 great Nebraska Lottery Lotto games that are all $1 per play with drawings every day. Nebraska Pick 3 lets you choose your own bet type. 2x2 has a $22,000 top prize. And with My Day, you choose a 6-digit date. Must be 19, please play responsibly. Oh, got a reminder. Produced Nebraska Lottery commercial. I'm all over that.
Aloha, neighbor. It is Animal for Super C Convenience Stores, here to invite you to your own personal backyard staycation luau. And every Friday this summer, free Fountain Fridays, plus other great in-store specials. You might be the winner who scores that $100 weekly gift card. Then at the end of the summer, you could win everything you need for your own staycation backyard luau. Details, register, ESPNLincoln.com. Super C, where they're always happy to see you, luau.
How did hiring the right person become so difficult? Well, it doesn't have to be. Alpha Digital already has targeted databases built to very qualified candidates that are just looking for the right opportunity. That allows you to target exactly who you're trying to reach with a budget that is customized just for you. Learn about all the possibilities by going to alphamediadigital.com today. Find your next star employee with alphamediadigital.com.
My teenage son only has one brain, and it'll keep developing through his mid-20s. But if he uses e-cigarettes, the nicotine in them can impact attention, learning, and memory, and can prime the brain for addiction. So I've talked to him about staying away from e-cigarettes, because my son only has one brain.
Learn more at cdc.gov/e-cigarettes today. A message from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and this station.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. At Children International, we know that the journey to end poverty for good begins first with a child. It starts with their first checkup, lesson, opportunity, job. That journey takes commitment from people like you and me to end poverty for good. Learn more at children.org.
The great thing about your phone or tablet is having information right at your fingertips. Who's that guy in the movie? Where's the best deal? Stuff like that. Of course, for insurance, you can't beat your Battle Creek Mutual Independent Agent and the new Battle Creek mobile app. Carry electronic proof of insurance, review policy info, pay your bill, or connect with your agent. And it's ready to help if you have an accident. Download the app for your device at bcmutual.com. Battle Creek Mutual Insurance. Better together.
Get your sports fix here. ESPN Lincoln is on the air at 101.5 FM and 1480 AM, online at espnlincoln.com.
Glad to have you back. Yes, sir. You heard me right. Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that, every 5 minutes until one of us passes out. Excellent strategy, sir.
Back with you. It's weekend edition. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We are streaming ESPN Lincoln Twitter, ESPN Lincoln Facebook. Brennan weighs in this morning. Morning, fellas. Not sure if that's Schmidt or Ricky Fowler. It's my favorite orange golf shirt, is what it is. I don't have the old Fowler mustache, though. We welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Sharpie, how's your golf game been this summer?
You know what? It actually has gotten better. I think as the weather has warmed up, my golf game has gotten better. Now, my look hasn't changed any. I can't rock the flat bill and on the shirt that has almost gotten ESPN Lincoln kicked off the air this morning. I can't do that.
Wow.
Like,
you hate the orange. Come on, man. It was on sale. Give me a break. It's about 15 years old.
It's obvious it was on sale.
There is road construction everywhere in Omaha and Lincoln and on the interstate, and they put out these cones, and weather comes through and it blows away. Why don't you just volunteer for the Department of Roads?
There.
It's called a statement piece, Gary.
Oh man, whoa! I'm getting arrows from all of you. Okay,
Chris is the king of clearance colors tops. Like
the shirt at 4 p.m, acceptable. The shirt at 7 a.m. Whoa,
man! She's tried to get rid of it. She was successful at getting rid of my 1996 national champion, 1995-96 championship Adidas shirt that everybody in Nebraska at one time purchased after the Fiesta Bowl. She got rid of that once we got married because it was pretty holy. But this has been safe.
So all that's been all the only option you had then was fresh squeezed orange juice shirt.
It looks money. I don't care what you all.
All right.
So Sharpie, let's. I don't know where to go from this. Other than is this a warning sign for Ireland? Is my shirt 2 weeks from today a warning for the Irish weekend?
I don't know that I would wear that.
No, I will not. Kranak will not let me get on the plane with him.
No. Well, I think the question is, are the offensive linemen going to wear that in Ireland? Or are they just going to be traffic cones?
Ooh.
Wow.
Huh?
Well, everybody.
I think there's some concern about the offensive line, and I don't think it's just 2 weeks from today, guys. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing all year.
Mm-hmm.
There's not quality depth. There's just so many questions. You don't know, how guys are going to react. I think one thing we have to be cautious about. We all love Teddy. And God, there's a lot to love about Teddy. I mean, the body looks great. He's in a good spot, but you're going to ask him to play 4 straight weeks of a lot of football on that knee that is not going to be a year from being fully rehabbed. And I know he's been cleared, and they would not take any chances if he was not ready to go. But how many snaps can he give you? Because let's be honest, Nebraska probably needs over the next 4 weeks, once the season starts, before you get to that bye week, they're going to need 60 to 65 snaps out of Teddy every Saturday. And you just hope that that knee holds up, that he's able to do that. But it's a big question mark. I will be curious to see as we get closer to the game, and of course as the game unfolds 2 weeks from now, if you get a sense from Mark Whipple how he feels about his offensive line in terms of play calling. If he plays away from their weaknesses, maybe more outside zone, maybe some of that kind of stuff, more quick game in the passing, all of those things will let you know how he feels about the offensive line. But I just think this is going to be an ongoing concern the entire season.
So does Hickson have center locked down, and is Corcoran's move to guard permanent, and who's the other guard?
Well, that's why, you have a little bit of a hesitation because you don't know. I think Hickson's going to be the center, and I think Trent Hickson will be solid. But remember, he's replacing Cam Jurgens, and that's a huge shoe to fill on that offensive line because of everything that Cam did that wasn't related to his position that he did last year. and improving himself. When does Corcoran get back on the field? I think a lot of these questions that you guys are talking about today and we're talking about right now, there could be some clarification tomorrow when they have their last major scrimmage. And maybe the most important part of fall camp is that second scrimmage. So guys fall into place and they test them a little bit more. But I think the only thing that's, you can count on is Teddy at one guard, and I'm going to say Ben Hart at another, Hickson in the middle, and then it's kind of up in the air at guard. Is it Bando? Is it Banks? Is it Williams? Is it Corcoran? Who's going to fill those roles? And those are the kind of questions I don't want to be having 2 weeks out from the start of the season.
They're working to get things solidified. Gary Sharp with us to talk some football weekend edition. It's Hail Varsity Radio, streaming ESPN Lincoln and ESPN Facebook and Twitter. You can comment on how grotesque my shirt is. You can add a point to some of the great Sharpie, and you nailed it with that whole faith and trust thing with Whipple. And do you think the offense is going to be diverse enough to adapt to what they have? And that sounds like a work in progress on the offensive line. Can Whipple find something to work early in the season, I should say, with what he does have, some of those groceries?
Well, I think we're going to find out. I think he really likes his running backs. I think he really likes his quarterback. I think they're starting to settle in on 3 or 4 wide receivers they feel comfortable with. They like Vogel. So I think there's bits and pieces early on that you're confident in that you can play. Now, his big thing is playing to people's strengths. So I honestly think you're going to see those running backs. I said this early. Mm-hmm. I think there are at least 4 running backs that touch the field in the first half against Northwestern. Will they all touch the ball? Who knows? But I think there'll be 4 running backs. I think they really like that room, and that room has come a long ways, and it's buoyed by a really good position coach. But I also think it's a very talented room. But again, you have to hesitate a little bit in this whole discussion about this football team because we don't know a lot of these guys. We've never seen them play wearing a Nebraska uniform. So we're just going off things that are said or our observations or speculating. So, that's why 2 weeks from today is like a great mystery machine. We don't know what's going to happen, but I do know one thing for sure. If Nebraska goes to play Northwestern, remember, Northwestern defensively last year was terrible. They had a brand new defensive coordinator, and he had trouble deciding on what was best. He went with a 4-2-5 system. Then they jumped after the Nebraska game, when they gave up the most points and most yards in Fitzgerald's career at Northwestern, they changed their defense. Now, they were a little bit better. They weren't great, but they were a little bit better. I would imagine that there'll be some mystery on that defense, but one thing I will guarantee you is that 2 weeks from today, you will not have a defense thrown at Mark Whipple, and he will go, man, I don't know what to do. We didn't practice against that. I think they have enough in their suitcase that they can go against any defense, their pet plays, that they feel reliable, that they can use before they are able to adjust on the fly.
When you look at Nebraska's receiving room, with the addition of 3 guys that are transferring in that probably will get in the mix, and Trey Palmer, Marcus Washington, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, who of the known names returning do you think is maybe one of the odd men out this year that we will not see on the field that much?
Wow. I would say Oliver Martin, but gosh, when I'm getting ready to say Oliver Martin is sliding to the back, he pops up and he's a Mr. Reliable guy. I don't know, Mark, if there's a guy, because there's not really a ton of depth at that position, and there's not a lot of returning guys. I mean, I think Alante Brown's going to stay in the mix. I know Brody Belt will get some snaps. So that room is kind of up in the air. But returning guys, keep an eye on Oliver Martin, where he fits in. Because when we want to get rid of Oliver Martin, he all of a sudden turns around and he'll make a big play, or he'll be on the field for a key moment. Hey, one thing to watch today with the wide receivers is, I know Scott talks after practice today. I'm sure we'll get an update on DeColdis Crawford. Mickey was asked about him the other day, and he said, you got to talk to Scott. So that leads us to believe that it's an injury, and it may be a severe injury. So we'll see what Scott says after practice today on that injury. But that all of a sudden is a position group where, you wanted to get to 9, you wanted to get to a solid 6. Do you have a solid 4 that you can rely on? I think it's a day-by-day thing with the wide receivers.
So Gary, 2 questions back. We hit the running game. This past question, we hit the pass game with you. So if you're handicapping it now, if you're in Vegas, do you take Nebraska having more rushing attempts or passing attempts in the first half against Northwestern? There's a lot of unknowns with the offense, but the way you see it right now, which one is just going to be more relied upon in the first half against Northwestern?
I think they'll run the ball. I think they will come out and try and establish something. I think you will find out probably pretty quickly that Mark Whipple likes his running backs, and he trusts his running backs to read the hole and to hit the hole and to make people miss. That I think they will run the ball a little bit more in the first half than they will passing the football. But keep in mind, last year, Northwestern had an All-American at quarterback, and they were still beat over the third level. They were beat over the top. And I'm sure you'll see Nebraska take a couple of chances there. But I think in this case, just to get their feet on the ground and establish themselves, I think you'll see Nebraska go run heavy to begin the first half.
Gary Sharp's with us, weekend edition. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmid, Mark Kranak, Elijah Herbal. Mark, let's focus a second here on tempo, and we got into it a little bit with Vogel. And say this thing is at its best with tempo, with the quick pass game. Could you envision a different look Nebraska hurry up in 2022?
I could, and I think it probably will not be the fast-paced lightning speed round that Frost wanted to go,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you'll see, everybody's kind of running their own version of tempo, and that's a word that's thrown around a lot in college football. Everybody goes at a certain speed, and they'll all describe it as, this is our tempo. I think you'll see a little bit of tempo. But the thing I'm really, really fascinated by is Mark Whipple's chess match. Like, he's going to be throwing some curveballs that he's not used to because, remember, there's a lot of these opponents he's never gone against or has not gone against recently. So it's all going to be kind of new to him and what he does on the fly. But I think, the quick passing game will be an important part. If you look at what happened last year, Adrian wasn't great in completing that short to intermediate pass. Casey Thompson appears to be a little bit better there. And as long as there's no pressure where the roof is caving in, I think you'll see a lot of quick passing game that Nebraska may look at it as, hey, that's a run. They do that in the NFL now, those short passes. They almost look at it as a run. Nebraska may do the same thing. But I think another thing that people will see when you're not going, tempo-wise is lining up under center. I mean, I think some of us that have seen the first 2 open practices see guys under center when they're doing some 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 drills, and you go, whoa, what is that? That's new. And I think that will also help guys, I think, in the running game. So kind of put that on your board 2 weeks from today. How many times Nebraska goes under center? Not in the red zone, but outside of the red zone.
Do we have a feel yet for whether or not Whipple is an offensive coordinator that likes to shuffle guys in and out, or does he kind of stick with a core group? How do you expect Nebraska to handle that?
You know what, Mark, that's a great question. I think he's a hot hand guy. Mm-hmm. I think he's a guy that he knows who his best players are, and they're going to be on the field, and they're going to stay on the field, and he's going to ride hot hands. I don't think it'll be a revolving door. Now, I think he will have a rotation. There'll be a rotation of running back. There'll be, of course, a rotation of wide receiver, some 2 tight end sets. But I think he's a guy that likes the hot hand and stay with things that are working on the field. And instead of overthinking things, he strikes me as a guy throughout his entire career that, you throw stuff against the wall and you learn from mistakes. And then you get some things that you really like. That he is, in his part in his career, in your mid-60s, when you've been in this game for over 40 years, he's not going to be a guy that tries to overthink things. He knows when he comes into a game, what his strengths are, what he feels that he can use to be successful. And I think you will see him use that until they're not. But I think guys that have the hot hand are going to stay on the field, and we're not going to be going, hey, that last series, Grant, 7 carries, 96 yards, and now he's on the sidelines for the next 2 series. I don't foresee that being the case.
Gary Sharp with us, weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Sharpie, about 90 seconds here. But what other tight end are you buying stock in aside from Vogel for Nebraska this season?
Well, I think you got to, and it's unfortunate Chris Hickman is hurt again. I mean, that's a reoccurring occurrence. And We may have a career where we don't know what we ever got out of Chris Hickman. And boy, has he had a strange career. You know, the situation with Fedoni. I think Brewington is out to prove to people that he's more than a red zone blower-upper as a blocker, and they like him. And then Borkashire, I think, has worked his way into the mix as well. So they'll find two reliable tight ends. I mean, this will be the year for Vokalek to shine. You know, now that he's, you know, Austin Allen got a lot of the love last year, but Vokalek, when he was out there, did a lot of heavy lifting as well. But I think it's probably Vokalek and Brewington right now. But, man, they need to keep that room healthy. And that's one of those rooms, guys, to finish here, that you don't really worry about with depth because of the guy that's in charge, in Sean Beckton, that he's going to find the best players to put on the field out of his position group, and that when they get out there, they're going to know what they're doing.
Gary Sharp. Sharpie, enjoy the weekend. I will make it my mission to find you an orange shirt so we can match on opening weekend over in Ireland, all right?
Well, it's hard to believe, guys. We're 2 weeks away. Who would have thunk it? We're that close.
Can't wait for it. Going to be outstanding. Sharpie, be good, brother. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, guys.
See ya. There he is, the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp with us. Man, you guys just jumping off the top rope. Each of you have a steel chair, and you just swing away.
You know, go vintage Tampa Bay Buccaneers creamsicle. Let's do it. Let's do it. That's the thing with clearance colors, man. You just know it, right? Like, there's a reason why that stuff ends up on clearance.
What gets me is
nobody wanted to buy it.
Like, there's a clearance rack
This
at
is
the
not an
outlet
outlet mall purchase.
It kind of looks like it.
Kindly take it back.
That was on the sidewalk out in front of the store.
It was
everything must go.
In the rack. Everything must go.
Yeah.
All right, Mark Kradak, Elijah Herbal, Chris Schmidt, back Monday at 4 on Hail Varsity. Take care. Have a good weekend. Thanks.